İlk seferdir ki Khojaly soykırımı gününü biz Khojaly'da.
This is the first time we have been commemorating the innocent Khojaly victims in Khojaly on the anniversary of the Khojaly genocide. After 32 years, we have returned to our native lands in order to perpetuate the memory of the victims of Khojaly. The foundation of a memorial complex will be laid here today, on February 26th. I must inform you that this project was ready a long time ago. The place was chosen near the Khojaly Genocide Memorial in Baku. But every year I had certain hesitations regarding the construction of the memorial complex and postponed the project because, just like you, I also believed and knew that we would return here, that we would return to Khojaly, where a memorial complex would be created to perpetuate the memory of innocent victims. After 32 years, you are back. After 32 years, after that horrific tragedy, we are living, building, and restoring every corner of Azerbaijan, every corner of Karabakh, as its owners, and as children of this motherland. Extensive construction work is underway on all the liberated lands. The Khojaly genocide will never be erased from the memory of our people. The people of Azerbaijan will never forget this bloody crime. 32 years ago, the Armenian state committed this horrific tragedy and killed innocent people. A total of 613 people were brutally killed. 150 people went missing. Of course, their fate is also known. More than 1,000 people were taken hostage. More than 60 children, over 100 women, and 70 old people were brutally killed by Armenian savages and fascists in one night. Unfortunately, our call for justice for Khojaly has fallen on deaf ears. It is true that 18 countries have recognized this bloody tragedy as an act of genocide thanks to our efforts. However, there are no big states among these countries. International organizations, many of them, have remained indifferent to this tragedy. The state of Azerbaijan, our government agencies, and also the Azerbaijanis living abroad, our public organizations, including the Ilham Aliyev Foundation, have made great effort to inform the world about the Khojaly genocide. The Justice for Khojaly campaign, which has been widely promoted by the Ilham Aliyev Foundation, has reached out to various parts of the world. Many events and presentations have been carried out. Books and articles have been published, and exhibitions have been organized. In other words, we have made a great deal of effort to convey this truth to the world, and we rightly demanded justice from the world, because the Khojaly genocide is a bloody crime that was perpetrated before the eyes of the world. Denying the Khojaly genocide is unfair and dishonest. However, the Armenian state, the same forces that stood behind it back then and are still there now, the same countries were doing everything in their power to cover up this crime, not to bring Armenia to account, not to introduce sanctions against Armenia, and to let them get away with it. We worked for decades, especially in recent years, to bring the perpetrators of this bloody crime to justice. But we saw that only we should restore this justice ourselves. And we did exactly that. The Second Karabakh War was a celebration of justice. As a result of the Second Karabakh War, most of the occupied lands were liberated, while the rest of the occupied territories were liberated 5 months ago. I know that you, the natives of Khojaly, were just as happy as all the people of Azerbaijan at the time. I also know that you were having certain thoughts about what would happen to Khojaly and Konkendi. I knew that, but I couldn't tell you what would happen. But you and I know that everything will be fair. We could not consider our territorial integrity and sovereignty fully restored without Khojaly. Khojaly has such a great place in the history and consciousness of the Azerbaijani people. This tragedy has left such deep wounds in our hearts that we could not be at peace with ourselves until Khojaly was liberated. 5 months ago, as a result of the anti-terror operation, all our territories that were then under occupation and where the separatists were challenging us, including Khojaly, were liberated. On October 15, 2023, the Azerbaijani flag was raised in Khojaly. We have also started major construction work in Khojaly. Our justice for Khojaly demand was completely justified. The fact that we secured this justice on the battlefield is fully consistent with international law and historical justice. We have restored historical justice. We avenged the innocent victims of Khojaly on the battlefield and did not let their blood remain on the ground. True, it took 30 years, but the work we did in those 30 years and our consistent policies made it possible for us to come and live here today. At that time, in the numerous meetings with displaced people during the year's occupation, they are called formerly displaced now, and the concept of displaced people has already been completely erased from all our citizens. I told them every time that the day would come when we would raise the Azerbaijani flag on all our lands and restore our territorial integrity. More than 100 internally displaced persons settlements were built, and I participated in the opening of all of them. The first internally displaced persons settlement was established with the participation of great leader Ilham Aliyev in Agca Khan settlement at that time. Specifically for the people of Khojaly, we did not have such great financial opportunities at that time. However, whatever money we had was used for these purposes, and this was an indication in itself. In other words, the great leader showed to us all that we must create conditions for those living in the most difficult conditions. At the same time, our main goal was the liberation of our lands. In the numerous meetings with the internally displaced persons at the time, I was saying to them that these conditions had been created for them, and that these conditions were good. The last tent camps, as you know, were removed in 2007, but it was a temporary residence. After the liberation of our lands, even better conditions will be created in your native lands. And today, we are seeing that the former internally displaced persons have already returned to 5 settlements. This year, the number of settlements will reach 20. This year, life will be restored in both Khojaly and Konkendi, including the nearby villages of Mali Beyli, Karkajahan, Tushsu of Shusha. The city of Agdam is being restored, and the first relocation to Agdam will begin next year. In other words, construction work is gaining momentum. As for Khojaly, after we fully restored our sovereignty on September 20th, I immediately issued the order to restore houses in Khojaly first, because the contemptible enemy committed a horrific genocide and displaced the people of Khojaly from their native land. In addition, they tried to change the historical name of Khojaly and settled separatists, our enemies, including foreign countries, in the houses of Azerbaijanis. Just look at the ugly crime they have committed against our people. And let me say this again, the world remains indifferent to it. Armenia and its patrons believed that no one would punish them. They were completely wrong, and they are still wrong today. Armenia, which is looking for a new owner and seeking refuge in somebody's arms, should understand that the only way is to accept all of Azerbaijan's conditions and give up its territorial claims against Azerbaijan. We will never forget the Khojaly genocide. Let me reiterate that we took our revenge on the criminals during the Second Karabakh War and the anti-terror operation, crushed them, destroyed the Armenian army, and forced it to sign capitulation twice. Unlike them, we have never fought a war against the civilian population. And everyone sees and knows that the military operations we conducted both in 2020 and in September of last year were conducted in full accordance with international humanitarian law. Everyone knows this, and no one can criticize us. This is further evidence of the greatness of our nation. However, there is a feeling of revenge in our hearts when we go back to the bloody history. When we look at those terrible videos and photos, we are filled with anger, and this anger will not let up even after 300 years. Not just 30, and this is natural. We are human beings, but at the same time, we are representatives of a great nation. A nation that has shaken off its manacles. A nation that united like a fist and broke the back of the enemy. The enemy with great powers standing behind it, both then and now. If those great powers had not supported them, our lands would not have been occupied in the early 1990s. We were powerless then, while they had great forces standing behind them. Today we are strong. And some people are telling us that we have mercy. But did they have mercy on us? Let me say again that all these are, of course, our thoughts and feelings. I repeat that we took our revenge, showed great professionalism, heroism and selflessness, both during the 44-day Second Karabakh War and during the one-day anti-terror operation. Our children were prepared to die to free these lands from the invaders. May God rest the souls of all our martyrs in peace.